At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Cristie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm really good.
I'm excited to have you on the show. Like I was saying to you just a little bit earlier, this is going to be an interesting one because here we are coming from a woman's point of view. And obviously, I don't know if most of your podcasts are with other women or with other men, but this will be interesting.
Yeah, I hope you're ready. You're going to get behind the curtain view.
Okay, sounds good to me. So what I'd love for you to do is share with the audience, it's fascinating how individuals get to a point where they start to make a difference in other people's lives, where they start to share their personal experiences. I'd love for you to share with the audience how you got to this point.
Yeah, great question. Well, it started when I was a senior in high school. I grew up in a really great family. It wasn't a Christian family, but it was a healthy, happy family. And my parents were very much in love. And I saw a good example of a happy marriage. And then my senior year of high school, there was an explosion. Everything changed. And my father left our family for another woman. And there was a divorce. And it was shocking. It was painful. And it really made a huge mess for a long time. And I think that's when my passion for marriage and family really started because of such a painful experience.
Oh, I can imagine. And so from there, obviously you're doing podcasts now and so forth. How did this all come about and developing a website and those type of things?
Yeah, so I had a real fear about marriage, as you can imagine, and in fact told my whole family I will never get married, right? Because after 20 years, he just leaves for another woman. So I was very fearful. However, I met my husband and fell in love, and we did get married, but I was determined that I was going to earn my own money and take care of myself and never be dependent on him. But the Lord changed that all around after I came to know him 4 years into my marriage. At any rate, next month in May, we're going to celebrate 30 years of marriage together now.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And so about 3 years ago, we have always been good at keeping up with our marriage. We've gone to retreats, we've seen counselors, I read all kinds of books on marriage and everything. But we had a few bumps in our road over these, 30 years that just didn't seem to be getting worked out in a way that was, that was good for me. And so I came across this book, The Empowered Wife by Laura Doyle. It's a New York Times bestseller. I came across that book about 3 years ago. And when I read it, it just changed everything. I began to recognize these blind spots in my own life and the way that I was showing up to my husband and the way I was reacting to him and responding to him, the ways that I was trying to control him and change him and different things like that, that I recognized from reading the book were causing some of these bumps in the road. And so after reading the book, I reached out for coaching. And right away on my first coaching call, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to help women create healthy, happy, lifelong, thriving marriages through coaching. And so I enrolled in the training school.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what I find interesting is, in your bio, you talk about the fact that you want to help women rewind their relationships, to the fun and romance of dating with or without their husband's efforts. So all of a sudden you're putting a huge responsibility on women. And my question is why? Do you find that there's in the culture that there happens to be a situation where that tends to be a real challenge, or do you find that just by creating that type of situation for the women that they're able to really bring their marriage back in where it needs to be?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, many of the women who I talk to, especially initially, say, well, why do I have to do all the work? He's the problem. He's the one who needs to change, right? And that's
Right.
the same way that I felt. I felt like if he would change this and this and this and this and this, then we could be happy, right? But here's the problem, Doug. If I have to have him change in order for me to be happy, where does that leave me? I'm ultimately hopeless because I have not had success in changing him or anybody else in my life, really, right? The only person I've had success in changing is me. And so rather than being a victim who is hopeless to ever be happy unless he changes, I decided to make the changes myself. And guess what? Here's what we all know. Women are influential, so influential. You've heard the saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right?
Right.
Women impact the temperature and the feel of the home. And so when I'm happy and I show up happy and content and all of those things, guess what? The house is happy. But when I'm grouchy and grumpy and gripey and naggy, things aren't so good at the house. So when I began to make the changes in myself, guess what? My husband began to respond differently toward me. And I began to get all the things that I had been wanting all along because he loves me and wants to make me happy. But I didn't know that before. I thought I had to coerce him. I thought I had to nag him. I thought I had to instruct him. I thought I had to criticize him and change him in order to get him to do the things I wanted. But come to find out, all I had to do was show up like that girl of fun and light that he met 30 years ago.
Well, and I love this concept of taking responsibility. And quite frankly, I believe that we all in relationships and in our lives need to take responsibility for what we're experiencing. I totally agree with you. But let me ask you kind of a sensitive question, because as you're talking about this, is this a cultural issue, do you find, among women, that they tend to create, ultimately after the dating and all of that is over, that they tend to create an environment that creates some dissension and challenges for the husband? I'm curious about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you from my own experience, I was definitely doing that and I didn't know it. And all the women that I work with, same thing. All the women who've been affected by this book and by this coaching and by these skills are experiencing the same thing. Now, not all women want to approach their marriage from this point of view. So yeah, there's a segment of women who would say, no, he's the one who needs to change, period. But for the women who are willing to investigate and experiment with a different way, these skills really work.
So I'm curious, percentage wise, what do you find is the success rate of those women who make this type of change versus, well, not versus anything? What is the percentage of those that find success in this? Because obviously there has to be some responsibility on the husband also. There's no question about that. But with the changes that you are going to suggest, today, what percentage do you find in your experience and perhaps in talking to others that are following the same system are having that type of success?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you from my experience in coaching and from the 12 women who I went through coaching training with, who were from everywhere, from Europe to all over the United States, everywhere in different religions, different socioeconomic levels, different marriages, right? And all of us saw change and results and transformation. Now, you're absolutely right. The husband plays a part. If he is having an affair and he chooses to, continue on that path, or for whatever reason, he decides not to accept these changes and make the marriage work, he can do that, right? He can do that, and that could happen. However, I still believe that these women are in a better position after having learned these skills and practiced these skills. They're happier as women, and they're better prepared for if there's another relationship coming along after practicing these skills than they were before. My husband says all the time, Cristie, you are so much happier. And it's true, because though I focus on the marriage relationship, these skills help in all my relationships. So I've had changes with my mom, with my brother, with my children, my adult children. These are relationship skills.
Oh, and I love that you say that, because I think that's so important to realize that this is a universal type of thing that can be applied in any way. And you're right. If you're dealing with an individual that's highly narcissistic, controlling, not faithful, or whatever that happens to be, or abusive, then there's a time. But the reality is, what you're saying is, as you go through this process as a woman, it gives you a better position to truly enjoy life and experience the relationship that you're looking for.
Yes. And as long as a woman wants to continue to stand for her marriage and try to make it work, I am ready to stand and support with her, because I believe in marriage. I don't believe there's a bad reason to stay married. I think that marriage and family is very important to our society.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm curious, how does a wife create, and this is part of, talking points that I want to talk about. How does a wife create the playful, passionate marriage that she really hopes and dreams for without her husband's involvement?
Yeah. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? But it's not. And the first step is really to make myself happy. Right? Because miserable people don't have happy relationships. Can we agree on that?
I totally agree.
Yeah, so I need to come to the relationship happy. And I know many of us as women, we're so busy, taking care of the home and the husband and the kids and working and all the responsibilities that we have, that we've forgotten to take care of ourselves. And so it's like when you're on the airplane and you have to put your oxygen mask on first yourself before you can help the others. I've got to make myself happy and healthy before I can serve my family in a way that's good and healthy and right. So all that means is that I need to remember the things that I enjoy in life, right? And women have forgotten who they are and what they enjoy. So that might mean that I go out to coffee with a friend. It might mean a hot bath. It might mean an exercise class. It might mean listening to a podcast or reading a book. I don't know. But whatever it is for each woman that she enjoys, that makes her happy, let's start incorporating those things into the day, like an appointment, like a doctor's appointment or a hair appointment. Because when you show up happy, it's going to highly increase your possibilities of having a happy relationship.
Well, and it's interesting, it's so true that the energy that we put out comes back to us, and people feel that energy. And you're right. I mean, you can only be around someone who's really happy for so long without becoming happy yourself. You just can't stay upset or whatever.
Or the opposite is also true. You can't be around somebody who's grumpy and nagging and complaining for very long before that rubs off on you too.
So the first step that you're talking about is really just finding ways to do things and make sure that you, as you say, make an appointment every day to do something that really fulfills you individually.
And women avoid this like the plague. They skip that chapter in the book. They don't want to talk with me about it in coaching. They think it sounds selfish. They think it sounds silly. And yet it's really the starting point for everything.
Well, and what comes to my mind is this question, because you hear this word narcissism, and it exists both with men and women. Okay, and so I understand what you're saying there about some women really worrying about that, because all of a sudden, is it all about me rather than serving my family in my relationship? And yet it's not narcissism. It's really being true to yourself. And that's the only time that you can truly start to experience that genuine happiness.
Mm-hmm. What happens, Doug, when we as women especially focus all of our attention and energy on the husband, the family, the home, is we become resentful. And that resentment is the poison to a good marriage. But it builds up over time, because guess what? He is sitting on the couch watching a football game, and I'm running around circles doing the dishes, doing the laundry, giving the kids a bath, putting them to bed, blah, 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 blah. And pretty soon I start looking at him going, are you kidding me? Right? And I'm mad and I'm stewing, and that affects things. And so rather than that, let's make sure I do something to take care of myself and make myself happy, so that that resentment doesn't take over and show up in all the ugly ways.
So as you've done this, and that's a great example. So if your husband is sitting there watching football games or whatever, and he's enjoying that, how do you get to the point where it's not making you resentful or angry?
Yeah, that's tricky. Well, guess what? My husband gets to have his self-care too. And for my husband, that's probably watching the football game on television. So I started to realize, oh, he's doing his self-care, right? That helped me kind of flip the story in my mind from, oh my gosh, he's so lazy, why isn't he helping me, into, okay, he's doing his self-care. And here's the other thing. I was forcing myself, feeling like a martyr, like I have to do these dishes right now. I have to do this laundry right now. My husband was patting the side of the couch going, come here and watch a movie with me. And I was like, I can't, because I have 1,000 things to do. And now instead I go, you know what? I've got this husband who loves me and wants to spend time with me. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to follow his lead and do some relaxing. And guess what? The dishes and the laundry will be there tomorrow, and I will have a fresh batch of energy to tackle them. And so right now, I'm just going to appreciate that my husband loves me.
You've really changed your mindset about that. So that was step number one that you talked about, is being able to get in and really find time every day to do something that really fulfills you and makes you happy. What are some of the other steps?
Yeah, the other one that's really a favorite for me is relinquishing inappropriate control. And that means that I stay on my own paper. Remember in school when they would say, keep your eyes on your own paper, right? They didn't want you to cheat off the people around you. My paper has all of my things on it that I'm responsible for. It has all my self-care and everything like that. If I keep my paper really fun and beautiful and interesting, then I stay on it. But if it gets really dull and boring, then that's when I start meddling in over on my husband's paper or my kids' paper or your paper, right? And that means that I'm getting involved in things that aren't mine to deal with. And when I do that, I feel stress and pressure and overwhelm, because I'm trying to manage everybody's paper. And I don't need to do that.
How do you manage your paper so it really is keeping you happy?
Yeah, well, it has the self-care on it for sure. And so in the bad old days, I would feel myself kind of getting into a bad mood. And I would think, well, there it is. I'm in a bad mood. What you going to do? Right? But now that I know the skills, when I feel that bad mood, when I feel that gripey, complainy going on, I'm like, have I been taking care of myself? Let me go to my self-care list and see, what do I have time to do right now in the next, 5 minutes that can shift this for me? I go, you know what? I'm going to go for a walk. You know what? I'm going to hop in the bathtub. You know what? I'm going to listen to my fun playlist of music and dance around in the kitchen. Whatever it is, whatever I have time for, I'm going to do something to cut that bad mood off at the pass and get happy again.
Well, and that what that reminds me of is this concept of mindset. And as I've had a chance to really study that, interview so many people that we talk about that, and the general thing that comes across is that you take those emotions that arise, recognize what they are for what they are, and then actively, consciously, mindfully do something to move them away, recognizing that, you know what, those are just those emotions, and do something that is going to change that. And that's exactly, in my mind at least, what you're explaining on how to do that.
Yeah, I tell my clients a lot of times, drop and give me 10. And I'm not talking about push-ups. I'm talking about gratitude, right? Because if I focus on the things that my husband is doing that are annoying me, because he does annoying things, right? He's human, just like me.
Right.
If I focus on those things, guess what? I'm going to feel annoyed. So I drop and give myself 10, and I write down 10 wonderful things. You know what? My husband goes to work every single day, and he supports our family. Thank you. You know what? He mows the lawn. He takes out the trash. He takes my son to baseball practice every day, which I don't want to do. There is a lot to be thankful for. So I can shift my focus from what he's not doing or what he's doing that's annoying me to all the things that he is doing that I love about him that I would have to do if he wasn't around. So even the simplest things, I can turn my mind to gratitude.
Well, so you've got mindfulness and gratitude, and I think that is so important, the gratitude. So what else?
Yeah, let me give you a fun example of something I used to do in the bad old days. So we drive my car on the weekends when we have family activities and church and all those things. And so my car would get dirty, right? Because the kids are leaving their wrappers and their water bottles, and my husband's leaving his drinks and whatever. And so on Sunday, on the way home from church, I used to give this wonderful speech. It was really more of a motivational talk, right? That went something like this. You guys need to get your crap out of my car. I'm sick of cleaning up after you. Take in your trash and da-da-da-da-da, right? And the whole family would just zip up and run away, right? They weren't motivated. You know what they said to themselves? Oh my goodness, let's get as far from mom as we can because she's in a mood, right?
Right.
And so what I learned through the skills is that I could express my desires in a way that inspires rather than complaining. So I didn't realize that was all just a bunch of complaints, and nobody listens when we complain, and nobody wants to be around somebody who's complaining. So I learned to say very simply, I would love to have a clean car. And you know what my husband said the very first time I said it? He goes, oh, I'll take it and get it cleaned. I go, really? He goes, yeah. So he takes it down to the car wash and has it cleaned. Well, guess what? I messed up again when he got home. He got home and I walked out there and I opened up the door and I was like, oh, and I started picking the little pieces of lint out of the carpet that the people had missed. I look up at my husband and he's got this like look on his face of defeat. And I realize that I think I'm criticizing the people who clean the car, but my husband feels like he's being criticized. Here I've gone and done this nice thing for her, and she can't even be happy about it. She's going to nitpick the little pieces that they missed. And I realized, and I said, you know what? I closed the door. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, thank you so much for doing that. What a blessing. You're such a wonderful husband. Thank you. And I changed my tune because I realized I was falling into that complaining again. And my husband had done something sweet. So I wanted to appreciate him for it.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I'm curious because I know that also one of the things you talk about are The 6 intimacy skills. So first of all, I'd like you to define intimacy, because I think people define it in different ways, and I want to make sure they understand what we're really talking about. And then what are those 6 intimacy skills that can be developed?
Well, when we talk about intimacy, we're talking about that connection and that relationship that you only have with your spouse. So it can mean sex and physical intimacy, but it also means those conversations and that affection. And like I said, the connection that you only have with your spouse. So we want to increase that connection. Women want to feel cherished and adored and taken care of and desired. And so that's all part of what we're working to create. And that happens through the intimacy skills, which, like I said, we're going to start with self-care. Another one that I mentioned is relinquishing inappropriate control. And another one that we work on is respect, because I would have told you that I was a respectful wife, and I would have told you that I respected my husband, but I needed to learn what respect looked like to a man. I've never been a man. I've never experienced that before. I had to learn that. And so I realized that criticizing and complaining, like the example I just gave, felt disrespectful to my husband. And so I had to clean that up. And I learned to clean that up through apologies. Doug, if I'm being honest, I don't think I apologized for the first 25 years of our marriage. Isn't that awful?
Yeah. So
but I've learned to.
As you talk about, respect for a man, what are some of the other things you have discovered besides criticism? What are some of the other things that you find are important to that husband that might start feeling disrespected? What are some of the other things that can happen?
Well, when I tell my husband how to drive or where to turn or which parking place to take, that comes across disrespectful, right? The message is, I don't think you're capable. I don't think you're smart enough to get us there, right? So I learned that that's disrespectful. When I tell him how to dress, that's disrespectful. He's a grown man. He got dressed long before he met me, right?
Right.
When I tell him how to do things or how I would do things, no, don't load the dishwasher like that. It works better if you do it like this. That's disrespectful. He's a grown man. Again, he's smart and he's capable, and I need to treat him that way. So I don't correct him anymore. I don't give helpful advice. My husband runs a roofing business, and I'll tell you what, before I learned the skills, you would have thought I was the roofing expert of the world. And the truth is, I have no experience running a roofing business, and my husband does an awesome job at it. So I've stopped advising him about his work. When he tells me his work, I say, wow, that sounds really tricky. I know you'll do the right thing. You always do.
I'm curious, how much does support fit into one of those intimacy skills? Being willing to support, your husband comes and says, hey, this is something I really feel I'm going to do. And you're initially going, no, I don't want you to do that. How important is support from that perspective?
Yeah, I think, and please don't misunderstand. I share my opinion. My husband values my opinion. He wants to know how I think and feel about certain things. We certainly both bring something really valuable to the table, and he is wonderful about bringing that out in me. I just know now that I don't have to have an opinion about every single thing, which I used to think I did. And I thought I had to say it too. So I spend a lot more time listening now and being quiet than I used to in the bad old days where I had an opinion about everything. So support, yes, my husband is allowed to dream out loud, whether it's realistic or not. And my husband is a dreamer, and he tells me lots of things. And I don't have to take every one of them as if they're in motion starting tomorrow. I can just listen and say, I hear you.
Well, and it's interesting. When I had my dental practice, I warned my employees right off the bat. I said, "Look, I think out loud." And so when I say something, please don't take that as this is what's going to happen. I'm just thinking out loud. That's just how I tend to think. And they finally figured that out, and it made all the difference. But what I hear you saying is how important communication really is. And I'm not sure people really understand the real value and the true way in which we need to communicate. Any thoughts on communication and how you have found with your husband the best way for communication to actually work on both sides?
Yeah, I was a communications major in college, and everybody wants to talk about communication when it comes to marriage and relationships. But what I've been learning over the past years is that it's different than what I thought it was. I thought when we talked about communication, more is better, more and more and more. Say everything, share everything. And what I'm finding out now is no, that's not true. For me, less is more. And so, like I said before, I offer less advice and less, I don't have to say everything that's on my mind. Sometimes when my husband gets on my nerves, I can share that with a girlfriend instead of telling him everything. And I can just vent to her and not bring it up to him. And maybe I just change the way I think about what happened. I don't have to say everything that comes to my mind because some of the things that I think would be hurtful to him. And I'm just not willing to sacrifice my intimacy like that by sharing something with him that's not really that big of a deal. I'd rather preserve my intimacy and let go of trying to control everything like I used to.
So have you found sometimes he will do something that really triggers you and all of a sudden those emotions that are within you that you didn't even realize are there just suddenly rise? How do you communicate to him? Or do you just always talk to a girlfriend about it? Or do you actually communicate that in a way that says, you know what? I'm taking responsibility for this, but the reality is when you do this, it is triggering emotions in me that I've not yet figured how to handle. Can you help me with that?
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Well, I will tell you that I don't practice these skills perfectly, right? I'm just a mere mortal woman. I'm just a human. So yeah, there are times when I go back to the old ways and blow the whole thing, but now I know how to clean it up. Now I know how to apologize and I'm comfortable taking accountability for what I've done. And so I can say, I'm really sorry. That was disrespectful the way that I spoke to you. Will you forgive me? Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked, I think, about 2, maybe 3 of those 6 intimacy skills. What are the other ones?
You want me to share all my secrets, Dr. Doug?
I do. That's part of why I have you on the podcast. Because I guarantee you, sharing them with the audience is only going to inspire them to want to reach out to you more.
Another one of the skills that I love that I never thought about before I got involved in this work is receiving graciously. And that means I receive help, I receive compliments, and I receive apologies. Compliments, help, apologies. And so that means that when I'm, carrying the heavy box and my husband says, let me do that. In the bad old days, I would have said, no, I got it, right? Because I want to be strong and capable. Now I say, thank you so much. And I give it to him. I receive compliments. So from anybody and everybody, when somebody says, I love your dress, I no longer say, oh, I got it on sale for $15 at Target. I say, thank you, right? When my husband buys me a gift, and maybe it's not my favorite, I use my manners my mom taught me growing up, and I say, thank you, right? In the bad old days, I would say, ooh, why'd you buy this? I don't like this. Can I take it back? Or something like that I would never say to one of my girlfriends because I wouldn't want to hurt their feelings. But because I thought communication in this marriage meant that I could say anything, I would say those things that just weren't really kind. Now I say thank you, and I receive gifts, compliments, and help.
Perfect. And I'm going to ask you for the next one.
Expressing gratitude, we talked about.
Yeah.
So I don't just make a gratitude list, which is helpful for my mindset, but I express the gratitude out loud. I think that I used to be stingy with my gratitude. Maybe I thought if I gave him too much, he wouldn't do as much. I don't know what was happening in my mind, but now I'm thankful for everything he does. Thank you for helping me bring in the groceries. Thank you for taking Evan to baseball practice. I thank him for everything, like I would, anybody else in my life. And the last skill is vulnerability, which is really an interesting and deep well. Vulnerability means that instead of showing up with my anger, which is really easy because it's right on top and it's the easiest one to express, I dig a little bit deeper and find out what's the hurt that's underneath the anger. And can I instead express that? Because my husband responds better to me in vulnerability than he does in anger, right? If I spout off in anger, he's going to come back with anger because we do mirror each other. But if I show up with vulnerability, I think so many times it kind of inspires that hero gene that's within every man, that he wants to take care of his wife and make her happy. And so sadly, in the bad old days, I didn't seem pleasable, right? He went and got the car washed, but I still wasn't happy because it wasn't good enough. So now I strive to be pleasable instead. So he feels successful as a husband. And that's what he wants, right? If he doesn't feel successful as a husband, he feels like a failure.
Well, as you started doing this, what changes did you start to observe in your husband as you started to make these changes and apply, all the skills that you have been taught and that you teach others now? What changes did you absolutely observe in your husband?
Well, like I said, I think that we mirror each other. And that goes in all relationships, like we were talking about before. If I show up happy, you respond happy to me. If I show up complaining, you may start complaining with me, or you're just not going to enjoy my company. So when I started to show up with gratitude and saying thank you all the time, guess what? My whole family started expressing more gratitude. It was like it was contagious. So they all started responding. Thanks for cooking dinner, Mom. Thanks for doing my laundry. Different things like that, including my husband. When I started being thankful for the things that he did, guess what? He wanted to do more things for me to make me happy because he could see that I was pleasable. When I started showing up happy because I had done my self-care, he was happy too. And he wanted to do more to make me even happier. He wanted to pile on. It was amazing. When I started receiving compliments well, he started giving more. It's like all the things that I wanted started coming toward me like a magnet. I was attracting them. I started attracting more affection and more intimacy, physical and otherwise, from him through these skills. When I started showing up respectful to him, he started just adoring me more. When I stopped trying to control him and control all the details of our lives, guess what? He started planning the vacations. I don't have to plan them anymore. He puts them all together and I just go on them and enjoy. It's beautiful.
Oh, that's wonderful. So let me ask you, how does the audience, if this is wrong truth for some of them, how do they find you and hopefully seek your help?
Yeah, well, I have a website. It's called relationshipswithamap.org. And they can find me under that on Facebook and Instagram also. I do 4-week workshops online that happen on Zoom Live once a week for 4 weeks. And I teach all 6 intimacy skills. And I give homework each night where they can start practicing and experimenting with these skills and start to see the changes right away on that first night.
Well, and I think it's just so important. This is something that I've learned. We all need coaches. We need someone outside that can be there to guide us, to help us, because this is not easy to do on our own necessarily. And
obviously, no one has taught us these things, right? Have you ever had a class on relationships? Not really.
Wouldn't that be amazing if you were to do that with the younger people so that when they got married, it actually was a better situation?
Yes, yes. I can think of a lot of classes I took in high school that I would have been better off with the relationship class instead of.
Amen. So let me ask you a question as we close, as you consider what is the main message that you would love to leave with the audience, what would that be?
I would say, ladies, you have a wonderful husband. And I know that you do because you picked him, right? And all the reasons that you fell in love with him and picked him are still there. They've just gotten buried underneath life, right? The responsibilities of life. And so I want to help you to show up in a new way that are going to revive all of those great qualities that you saw in him to begin with. There is hope for you to have a thriving marriage, and I want to support you in that.
Wonderful. Cristie, this has just been really fascinating to me because it just goes against all this culture that, the man's the one that has to, be responsible for all of this. And I love how you've taken that responsibility. But I love also the fact that as you change, you bring about a change in your husband to where you have both changed, but you took the responsibility at first to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear it, especially from a man perspective, right? My husband will tell you that coaching is the best money we've ever spent.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. So anyway, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And folks, I hope you've taken some hints out of this. And, for the men that are listening, you could do the same thing. And so, take these hints and recognize that you can develop these relationships. Both men and women can take that responsibility to do that. And as they do, I think we're going to see a much healthier, happier society in general. So, Cristie, thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you bet. And folks, thanks for listening. Hope you'll join us again soon.